Welcome to another enlightening episode of Essential Leadership Skills. Today, we're thrilled to host an extraordinary guest with us, Ram Prasad, the CEO and founder of Delence. Ram is a titan in the tech industry, boasting over 2 decades of experience and a reputation as a leading expert in fractional CTOs, CPO services for startups and small to medium-sized businesses. What sets Ram apart is his proven ability to drive exponential growth, delivering strategic vision and innovative solutions to his clients. In today's episode, we're excited to delve into the world of fractional CTO/CPO services with Ram. He'll shed light on the unique advantages of hiring a fractional CTO, CPOs, and why it could be the game changer your business needs. Please sit back and take great notes.
This is a Touchstone Publishers presentation, your trusted source of leadership knowledge.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. As you said, we've got an expert in our field, in his field, that's going to help us understand this idea of fractional CTO. Ram, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenn.
So let me just start off by asking you a simple question. Not so simple, really. When we look at what you do, what is it about you that sets you apart from all the other folks that are involved in this? I haven't really heard of anybody else who does that fractional type of work that you're doing, but what is it that sets you apart from a lot of other people?
I have a passion to see startups and small businesses grow. So my client's problem is my problem. I take a deep personal interest in solving that problem. So it's a personal engagement that makes the difference. I leverage my expertise as a prior CTO to CPO background in technology to accomplish that. But if the final differentiator, because everybody's business problem is unique and different, the personalities involved are different. So I empathize with the leadership, I step in. And so that sets me apart. Personal touch, the deep personal touch.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense when you get really involved. But how many years of experience do you have in this area of work?
I've been a fractional CTO since 2016. So that's roughly
Okay.
six and a half years. But I've been in leadership technology roles for almost 2 decades.
Oh, okay.
I started my career as a software engineer in the same technology space, so 25 years, but leadership roles, 20 plus years. Yeah.
Okay. I understand what fractional is. When you're talking about like fractional airplane ownership and things like that, but can you give us a definition when you say fractional CTO, CPO services? Can you tell us what that really means?
Sure, absolutely. So fractional essentially is as little as, to put it in concrete terms, as little as 1 to 2 hours a week to up to 20, 25 hours a week. So the 1 to 2 hours a week is typically someone who needs mentoring services. So they have a team in place, but the company feels that maybe they have a CTO already in place. In fact,
Mhm.
that's one of my clients. But the CTO has been promoted through the organization and needs to perform. The CEO feels that he needs to perform at the CTO level.
I
So
see.
yes. So then I sit down with that CTO for an extended lunch once a week. We go through his accomplishments the prior week. I mentored him on how he needs to think strategically as opposed to tactically. And
Hmm.
that's as little as 1 to 2 hours a week. And my largest client is 20, 25 hours a week. I am entrenched in their daily operations. They want someone who execute, but they don't want to pay someone for the effective equivalent of 40 hours a week. But and so with my level of expertise, maybe 20 hours is sufficient to accomplish that. So I'm entrenched and everything in between and everything in between.
So when you're looking at the level of work that you bring to the table to help people, what, let's say you have someone who's interested in saying, okay, we can't really, at this point, can't justify a 40-hour CTO or CPO, but we do need the help. So let's say it's 20, 25 hours. Can you give us a framework of what you would cover for that? Let's jump in for 25 hours a week. You give us a
Sure,
quick framework what that means?
absolutely. So most customers, and my target customer is typically a CEO of a startup to mid-sized company. They come to me when they have a problem. So I'm a firefighter. So
Hmm.
so because it's not like they're looking strategically to fill in a CTO role, then they come to me. So there is a problem. So a problem could be in half the number of cases, it is delivery is an execution problem. So they have talent in place. They have talent in place. They have customer demand, but they are unable to align the resources, deliver on the customer demand. So I'll give you a recent example. They have around, so to answer your question on what I typically, the framework. So what we do is they have a dozen or so resources, but we look at it from a three-pronged strategy. We look at it from a technology architecture perspective. Do they have the right framework to execute on their expectations? Number one. So if there are changes to be made, we create a strategy for that. Do they have the right resources in terms of talent in the existing team structure to execute on the roadmap? Do they have so people? And then do they have the right processes to make sure that the priorities are executed upon? So look at it from a technology, process, and people perspective. So then we identify bottlenecks in each one of those, and then take corrective, and then create corrections in either one of those locations to execute and make sure it happens. So from week one, the week one is really an assessment and understanding of the problem and problem statement and desired end state. Then we execute. So in some cases, the 20-25 hours, I'm executing. I'm hands-on in terms of leadership role there. In some cases, I am mentoring or I'm guiding, and then somebody else in the organization takes it up. So I provide the third-party perspective, the outsider expertise perspective, and so depending on the situation. But it's essentially those three legs that make up the problem.
So this question just came to me when you were answering the previous question. When you're a fractional CTO, and this is more of a leadership style question, do you have a challenge with people following your direction because you're not really part of their company? And if you have that challenge, how do you get past that?
Yeah. So the first couple of weeks is establishing credibility in order for people to follow your guidance. So to answer the question, you have to build credibility. I have led large teams before I started doing fractional CTO type of work. So I have led large teams. So I understand team building exercises, management of team. I've done that. But in a new setting, people must recognize that, hey, this is somebody who can make a difference. Like I told you earlier, fortunately, most people come to me when there is a fire to be extinguished.
Be put out.
So then I take that problem as a starting point, solve that problem in whatever way that makes sense in the context in the context available, and establish credibility. Once credibility is established, then people do follow.
Okay, I can track with that a little bit. You wrote an article for LinkedIn, and I'm wondering how much of a challenge is it? Because especially when you have a new startup company, this is where they most likely would come to you as a CTO, another fractional CTO or CPO. But lean, how does that apply? Do you put that into almost every company you go to? Can you tell us, first thing, tell us about lean? What does it mean? My listeners who are regular listeners know because we've had that discussion before. But when it comes to CTO, tell us a little bit about being a lean, using the lean process, I should say.
So it is a broad framework. I don't take it. It's a customized solution for a client. I apply what makes sense in the context that is possible to give quick results. So I adapt it to make results. But lean essentially says in summary, do something quick and short. Deliver in iterations, in small and quick iterations, so that you can learn from the output that you have delivered as opposed to a delivery cycle that is weeks or months apart. And then by the time you deliver it, you spend it may not be what the customer wanted or what you expect. So the idea here is to shorten the iterations to the extent so you can learn quicker. So you take a big chunk of work, break it down into manageable bits, define it into much more granular, and focus on delivery of that aspect. See how the outcome was delivered, iterate based on the feedback of the outcome. And so that is what I told you earlier about the aspect of process. So I do apply lean. Now, in some cases, customers do not have a lean infrastructure, so I don't come in and change it overnight to establish. So it's not something I do day one. It's something that I know works. It's something that I know the customer has to head towards in the long term. But to extinguish the fire, I navigate the customer from where point A to eventual point B, which is the lean approach, if it makes sense, as long as it makes sense. But it's a step, it's a journey. It's a journey moving there.
Yeah, it is.
Moving. So it's not an overnight. It's not like I come in and approach, I take it over. It's
Yeah.
customized. It's a
Right.
customized journey. Customer.
So when you're working and let's say you're hired on as a CTO and I say, hey, just take the ball and run with it. Do you have any examples of how you would apply the lean process? Like maybe it's a real world example or just a theoretical example of how you would apply the lean process as a CTO. I can
Sure.
see applying it as a chief operating officer, but maybe you can talk into about being the technology officer.
Sure. Yeah, I do have several clients who want to relieve themselves of the technology management role, especially founder CEOs who now need to focus on fundraising, who now need to focus on business development to bring business in. And they have been managing the technology team and they are happy that somebody else is doing it. Maybe
Yeah. Okay.
they're happy. They're excited about that.
Operate, yeah.
Get off my plate because they have been doing it until now. So a lot of, so that happens very frequently where once this credibility is established or trust is established, they'll say, okay, it's yours now, do how you want. So in a lot of, so yes, so then I have multiple current customers where I have complete leeway over doing that. So yes, so the way I would start is, are we building the right are we building the right thing? Because one thing is to execute. So we need to, so the process starts from, are we building the right thing, to then building the right. So you
Mm.
do, so you, because you can't just take a requirement and say, I'll build it. And you put your technical talent and execute on it. And then at the end of the day, you build it, but it doesn't move the needle. It does not move the needle.
Yeah.
It does not
Yeah.
move the
Yeah.
needle. So the lean approach starts from, are we building the right thing? So that you do. So that's where I take on. That's why I included the CPO services as part of my services. I take on the CPO hat. So the lean approach starts with the CPO hat. We validate, are we building the right thing? We validate that. So if I have complete leeway, that's where I start. I speak to a few customers. I do some research. I work with the product managers. I work with the business team to understand, hey, why are we building what we did? What is that? I'm explaining it at length, but it is a rapid turnaround of validating, making sure. And we may not have the answer day one, but that is the process I want to incorporate. You want to
That's a process I would think would run throughout the entire life cycle of the company.
absolutely.
I
But you
wonder though,
but
go
you'll
ahead.
be amazed. You'll be amazed at people making roadmaps based on competitive research, based on what the executive team want to do, and that does not move. So it happens all the time. So you need to incorporate customer validations in the upfront in the process. Yeah. But you were saying something?
I was going to say, coach me on this a little bit because in order for lean to really work, my understanding is you have to, like you just said, get customer feedback to validate it. But as a CTO, is the customer the end user or is the customer the organization itself?
The customer is always the end user. But the organization members are a proxy to the end users. So in the initial iteration, I may use business analysts or product managers or product owners who have an understanding of the product. And I would just ask deeper questions on why we chose this to build, why not this. I would not go directly into the end customer at this stage. I would try to understand from in-house people why they chose what they chose to be built in the roadmap, understand their context of the rationale behind what was selected to build. So that is a starting point. Then, and so we, again, like I said, it's not an overnight. If they have if it's a process, but
Yes, it is.
but I would strive to inculcate thinking in the team on how to get customer validation. But we will take what we have, we'll take the best information that we have, and that is the process to identify what bit. Yeah.
How do you get around the fact that sometimes the in-house customers, the business analysts, those folks sometimes don't have, this has been a lot of experience that I heard, they don't have the right answers. They have their answers, but it's not what the end user wants. It's not what, B2B, the other business is going to use.
You're right. So the process takes care of that. The process takes care of that. We
All right.
define from the CEO what is that, what metric, what measure, what needle are we moving? We are increasing customer retention, we are increasing revenues, we are increasing customer adoption. So we measure that. So then in the first iteration, we take what we have. In the absolute first iteration, we take what we have, but we measure what was accomplished. Then we report, you wanted to increase revenues by 5%. We decreased revenues by 10% after delivering this. We go a second iteration. So are we doing, then the numbers and framework allow us to question what we have done. So then the thought process comes in. Okay, we wanted to increase revenue. This did not increase revenue. So let me give you an example. So I had a customer, I still have the customer. I have a customer that a couple of years ago came to me. They were stuck at 6 million or so in revenues. They had built around, and 95% of their customers were using one of the 10 modules that they built. So they built the other 9 modules, amazing enough, based on what they called customer feedback. So they built hands, but when they delivered the product to the market, customers were not buying the other modules. They were continuing, all customers and even new customers were continuing to use the one module that they built 10 years ago. So that one module was popular. And so they brought me on to solve the problem of how to increase adoption. So and they gave me leeway. So this customer gave me leeway. So in this particular case, I actually spoke to around 40 of their customers. They gave me access to that. I spoke to 40 customers and identified the real pressing, compelling problem that they were experiencing in their workflows. And based on that problem, I identified a need for a different module that was not one of the 10 that they already had.
Oh,
Because the customer discovery process that they did was asking, what do you like to see? And all the features that they built, other modules were nice to have modules, but nobody was willing to pay for it. But the customer discovery process that we engaged in identified a different module that needed to be built. They built that module in a matter of a couple of months because they had a strong engineering culture. And then the revenues doubled in a matter
wow.
of a year.
Okay.
And it's still growing. So 1 year after I came on board as a fractional CTO, CPO, their revenues doubled because we introduced a new module that they and their competition did not have. But it was a confluence of other modules. The problem was existing, but it was building it in a way that addressed the problem genuinely.
I follow. Okay.
Yeah. That is an example of a lean approach where you start with, are we building the right? Then once we identify that, then we take on the CTO hat and execute it. Take that big chunk, build it, identify smaller chunks, take it to the end, deliver the smallest chunk, back, repeat the next small chunk, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of takes care of my next question, but I want you to put it together for us. Why should someone hire a fractional CTO? What's the real benefit to a company doing that?
The fraction, independent of size of company, whether you're a small company, a startup, or a $1 billion company, the problems are very similar. You have an execution problem. Are you building the right thing? How to build the right thing? How to go in a agile fashion to deliver quickly? The problems are the same. A small business enterprise, a small business or a startup do not have easy access to the right talent who can provide strategic direction to the company to execute correctly. So while the problem is the same, they do not have the access. They don't have access to talent. Meaning it's hard to recruit the right person. It's hard to pay the right amount, the right talent, the right money. It's hard in general to find a full-time person to take care of this because so then you're languishing with lack of talent. So the first benefit is you have access to talent at an affordable, relatively affordable price because you don't have to engage it. You don't have to hire a time employee. You don't have to make a commitment to a full-time hire. You don't have to pay the full-time resource and stuff like that. Because those hirings are normally risky. It impacts the company strategically, tactically. If you make a wrong hire, it could impact your company for years to come because wrong processes in place, wrong technologies in place, it could impact it. So it's a commitment to hire, but it's a lack of expertise, unable to hire at the right price, but also the right person. So that's the biggest benefit of a fraction. You can try it out for a few weeks, for a few months, stop it when you don't want it, scale up or scale down as you need it. And most of my customers I've noticed are willing to pay as long as the outcomes are delivered to. So if you deliver to the outcomes, that's what they're looking for.
Sure.
And so that's the biggest benefit you can get.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, like you said, I've seen where there'd be the challenge of I've hired this person. Now I got to keep him on board, pay his salary, and he's not getting anything done, pay for benefits, and he's not getting anything done. And we've set back just time wise, but let alone choosing the wrong things to build out. But that brings up a question for me, Ram. For you personally, I gather that you enjoy working with startups more than some of the other things. Why? I mean, startups just be a clear slate, but a big mess.
That's why I enjoy it. So when I started my career as the first employee, as a software engineer, as a first employee of a startup. So I built the first version at that. This is how I started my career right after graduate school. And I built the first version of the product. I helped release it to market. I was involved in the idea, in building, in post-deployment support, in hiring. During my tenure there, the company grew from two, the CEO and myself, to over 100 plus people.
Wow.
I work through the entire spectrum of the organization from growth to 100 plus of people in the organization. So I got my startup bug. That's where I got my startup bug. I just, it became addictive. It became
That
addictive.
makes sense.
So
Yes.
I
That
love
makes good
to
sense.
see that 1 to 100 to 200 people growth, just the process to get that. So why did that company grow? So then subsequently I worked for one large organization. After that, I did work for JP Chase, but that was not, I was not
Yeah.
excited. So then I went back into the startup world.
Yeah.
So I spent most of my career in startup world. So it's just, I'm enjoying the growth phase. Or what does it take it from zero to wherever you want?
And that's a big challenge because I think most startups, founder, not really aware of those type of issues. Tell me, what are you doing right now to enhance and increase all levels of business? I know maybe startups are your favorite to get involved in, but what are you doing right now? In other words, I guess I'm asking you to give us a little bit of a commercial about you and your services. What are you doing right now?
Right now, my services is is it extends, it's solving the problem that the customer has. So like I told you an example, I started as a CTO with my background. I
Yeah.
expanded it to CPO services. I expanded it. I have a customer who is in the operation. I'm streamlining their operations right now. They have an IT service, that managed service, that they want streamlined. So I'm expanding it into fractional. So I'm expanding it to whatever. And with my breadth of knowledge across multiple startups, working across the entire spectrum of the company, I am familiar. I have expertise and background in handling a variety of problems. Just broaden it. So that's number one thing I'm doing. So I'm solving the problem at hand is what I visualize it. Number two, I am building a framework that other people who I bring on board as fractional CTOs and CPOs as part of my company can follow. So they have a pattern that they can follow. So I'm not the bottleneck. So as we are growing, as the organization is growing, as the customer base is growing, I cannot do everything, but I I'm proud of the frameworks that I have built the patterns of success that I've established with my customers, beginning from how to engage to how to transition knowledge at sign off and all the things in between. So I'm creating a document, documenting the systems, the framework, the process, so that anybody who has that broad expertise can follow my process and deliver the same level of outcome. Because the last thing I want is just because I'm growing, I bring on someone else, they do something differently. They don't they don't give the personal touch. Then my credibility,
Yeah.
my credibility is lost. I
Well,
think personal touch is required. So those are the two things
I I think that's so critical to say that because in my mind, what you're saying is that I have it documented well enough that the next person can come in and pick up. I'm finishing up. So that's so critical. That in itself, to me, is a huge value for companies. Just it's documented, and here's how we're going to continue.
how
And plus the fact that you don't walk in and try to tell people, okay, switch to this lean process now.
yeah,
So I
right.
think those are two huge values. I want to ask you though, this may be a little bit hard question for you, but I don't think so. What question should I have asked you that I did not ask you? What question should I have asked you that I did not ask?
No, you're a good podcast host. So you did ask me good questions. But are you asking from a perspective of a podcast, or are you asking from the perspective of a customer?
I'm asking you, I'm not putting any qualifications on it.
Sure.
Okay. What is out there that you said, Glenn, if you would have brought that up, it would have been better for the listener?
Oh, I see. For the listener, how do you build that credibility? Because like you asked a very good question in the first instance. How do you are managing a team? How do people take on? And that's one of the major challenges of the role. That is definitely one of the major challenges. And so that's a good question to ask: is how do you build credibility? So I just said it earlier. You build credibility, but how do you do that? How do you do that?
Yeah, that
And
is a good question.
yes, and so you build credibility through understanding the problem, because a deep understanding of really not what they state as the problem, but what is the real problem at hand. You build credibility by building relationship. You speak to not only your customer who reached out to you, the CEO, but you speak to the team members, you speak to peers of the CTO, maybe the chief sales officer, maybe the chief marketing officer, if the chief operations officer, you speak to all of that. So you build a relationship, and you of course deliver results. But only when you have understood the problem and you have built relationships can you deliver results. Because so that I do take time upfront. And now people on Zoom, one thing is I don't go for lunches. I can't go for, I don't know. Previously I used to go for lunches a lot. Now my
Yeah.
customers are not necessarily in the same city. So
Yep.
then but I still do it through Zoom and stuff like that. I do take time to call, try to understand and understand what their expectation is. So I'm a friend. I build that rapport, and I do that fast. So that's essential, because independent of, there's always a perception, and I may deliver quick results, but the perception might be different in their mind. So that is essential to build that relationship, to understand. And through the relationship, you understand the problem, not just at the surface. I want to increase this faster, but through that relationship, I can also drive the outcomes. I can influence. I have better chances to influence this. But you build credibility, but you have to do it fast. In this space, you don't have a luxury of a month or two, because
Probably a week or two, maybe.
but a week or two, you have to do it during the honeymoon period.
Hmm.
Honeymoon period is 2 weeks. You have to, but you have to do that. You take time to.
You know what thought came in my mind when you were saying that? The CEO says, I want to improve by 5%. The simple fact that you've built that credibility and been talking with other people, you have a better viewpoint on how to get to that 5%.
Yeah. So it helps. Absolutely. And maybe the 5% is not the real stated goal. We need to understand it at a more granular level, because 5% is revenues, but I may not be, there are other factors be outside of my control to get to 5%. So I have to find out
Sure.
what is it that I have to, because there's a sales team involved, which I don't have direct influence over. So the goal might be 5% for the executive, but I have to find out, I will dig deeper to find out what is it that I really need to do. to be viewed as success. To be viewed as success.
Just to put a bow on it and be respectful of time, when you look at this idea of people get to know you and your work, like I said, I found your LinkedIn article and I read it and I said, I want to know more about that. How do people get to know more about you and about what you're doing?
Yeah, that's one way. You follow me on LinkedIn. You follow on LinkedIn. That's
And that
one
link
way.
will be in the show notes, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so I do publish a lot. Because it is important in this industry and this space to be viewed as an expert, not just be an expert, but also be viewed as an expert. So I do publish quite a bit of articles on LinkedIn. I try to keep that as time permits. I allocate time for that. But so that's one way to get to know more about the company. But if you just wanted, reach out and get a free consultation for 2 hours of free consultation for your specific problem, you can go to my website, delence.com, DELENCE.com, and there's a contact us page.
Okay.
So that's free consultation for 2 hours. But yeah, if you want to know more, just follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to update our website in the coming weeks to give more flavor to what we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, some great information. I really thank you for taking the time. As we talked about before in our it's so important to me that we start delivering solutions. The ideal of a fractional CTO, that's a solution. So I appreciate you taking the time to deliver that solution to us and chatting with us.
Absolutely, Glenn. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it and look forward to future talks, future conversations.
Yeah, I do too.
All right. Have a good
Once again, thank you for joining us here on Essential Leadership Skills, the broadcast. We look forward to accompanying you on your leadership journey and helping you become the best leader you can be. Remember to subscribe and share, and we'll see you in our next video.